Welcome back, gentle listeners, for another episode of Faith and Reason. My name is Dr. Gaven Kerr, and who am I joined with?
Sean Palmer.
Sean Palmer.
I am one of Gaven's philosophy students at St. Patrick's.
Are you actually my philosophy student?
Well, technically no, but we exist in the same department.
We do. So you didn't just lie to the gentle listeners?
No, I try not to.
No. We are joined with Sean Palmer here, not the indefatigable Neve Palmer, the Sean Palmer this time.
Yes, and actually there is no relation as well.
None. Well, though, there probably will be some sort of Irish ancestry going on there somewhere.
You can probably go back far enough and find some sort of connection.
Well, this is it. Hopefully Neve is not listening to us right now, because Neve is off praying for us and for herself. She's on retreat right now. So that's why we've got Sean in today, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll try to do my best as a replacement.
Yeah, exactly. Good replacement. So, gentle listeners, today we have another interview. We're going to be interviewing Sean today and chatting with him, just as we did previously with one of our other students, Andrew. But before we get into the interview, I'll just let you know how to get in contact with us. So for anybody who would like to write into us, and we would like to see some either hate mail or fan mail, we don't mind. The postal address is Radio Maria Ireland, St Anthony's Business Park, Ballymount Road, Dublin 22. And that's Radio Maria Ireland, St Anthony's Business Park, Ballymount Road, Dublin 22. And if you'd like to call us, it's from within Ireland, it's 014123456. That's 014123456. And if you want to call from outside of Ireland, that's plus 353 14123456. That's plus 353 14123456. Now, if you would like to text into the WhatsApp, the number is 089 467 2000. That's 089 467 2000. And if you want to text in from outside of Ireland, that is plus 353 89 467 2000. That's plus 353 89 467 2000. And you can always email us at info@radiomaria.ie. That's info@radiomaria.ie. So, with that said, shall we get into it, Sean?
Of course.
Yeah. So, how should we do this? Should we, who I am, where I came from, where am I going?
Sure.
That sounds right. Sean, just tell us about yourself. Give us a wee bit about your background, who you are, and what you're doing here in Ireland.
Yeah, so, again, my name's Sean. I am from Doylestown, Pennsylvania.
Nice.
Historic Bucks County.
Mm-hmm.
About an hour north of Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
And I was born Catholic, raised Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
I began my kind of studies at my undergraduate studies at Providence College, where actually that's where I began this engagement with philosophy, because I was very interested in history in college.
Mm-hmm.
And so philosophy for me was kind of just one of the courses we had to take as part of the Development of Western Civilization program.
Sure, yeah.
And so it was began this kind of in the background exposure to philosophy. And it was actually when I enrolled in taking Greek, because I love language.
Yeah.
And it was really reading Plato, engaging in Greek.
In Greek?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, do
you hear that, gentle listener? Reading Plato in Greek at undergraduate level?
Yeah, it was the third semester of Greek. You have to do a lot of, Hanson and Quinn and all this type of an intense memorization first before you can dive into Plato. But
So you weren't even doing a classics degree?
Yeah, it was kind of funny because I had really no idea what I wanted to do or what kind of, I just picked classes that I wanted to take. And I guess it kind of just tumbled forward into some sort of studies of classics and philosophy.
So I don't know what I want to do, so let's study history, learn Greek, and read Plato in Greek.
Yeah, it's just kind of, just go for it.
Right, okay. Gentle listeners, this is the way to do academia, isn't it?
Yeah.
Go into an undergraduate degree, not too sure what you want to do, fall in love with a subject and just pursue it.
Yeah, the love of learning.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about that, but sorry, I interrupted you. Please.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah.
So it was actually with this exposure to learning Greek and reading Plato where I felt you feel language kind of break open because you're kind of, growing up in a language and you're restricted to the normal everyday communication. When you see how concepts kind of travel through language, that's something that's always kind of stuck with me.
Yeah.
And so when you engaged in Greek, you saw the kind of the poetic kind of play in language and interpretation and translation. And reading Plato, translating Plato yourself, even this it was the Apology, and which is a very passionate text where Socrates, defends himself and is actually convicted to death. And so you engage in all these different levels of emotion and deeper meaning. And so it was from that actually that really began under the surface an engagement with philosophy.
Right.
I finished my degree in history, minored in classics, and then again I kind of fell into teaching after I graduated. I was a bartender down the shore,
nice,
Jersey Shore, and just decided to teach. It was a nice opportunity open to me at a small Catholic classical school, and because it's very interesting in my undergraduate. Everyone was like, "Oh, so you're a history major, so you're probably going to teach," and I was like, "No, I don't want to teach." And so I just kind of fell into teaching, and it really kind of, with teaching in a small Catholic classical environment at a classical school, it really fed my own desire to keep learning. And then made me want to get my master's in classical education from University of Dallas. And then it just kept feeding this desire, and now I'm in Ireland studying philosophy.
What brought you to Ireland? What brought you to St. Patrick's in particular? I mean, how did that sort of come upon your radar?
Well, a friend of mine, who the listeners may know, Andrew Parrish, he was here a couple of weeks ago.
He was, yeah.
He told me about St. Patrick's because we were both kind of looking at furthering our studies and looking for an authentically Catholic institution with which to do philosophy, but philosophy that's not neutered of any kind of attachment to the questions of faith and truth. And so St. Patrick's was a newer program, and it was in Ireland, and he said he knew somebody that was going there, and it seemed like a fresh perspective. And as he explained to me, showed me the contact, how to get in touch with you. I was like, sure. And I kind of brushed it off for a while because I was looking at getting my doctorate at University of Dallas and to continue kind of in that classical education field. But as I prayed about it, and then I had a lunch break interview with you, and I was kind of sold on it then. And then it just kept going. And for a while, I thought I wasn't going there. I thought I was going to Dallas. And then after the second interview, I just I had to make it happen.
Yeah. And you came to St. Patrick's and you saw the Hogwarts building.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You're sold right there.
Gentle listeners, for anybody who has never been to St. Patrick's College or St. Patrick's Pontifical University in Maynooth, come and give us a visit sometime and see our grounds. There's plenty of space to walk around, isn't there, Sean? And
it's beautiful.
As soon as you come in, it just looks like Hogwarts.
It's this beautiful square, and it's you just can't take your eyes off the giant Gothic or neo-Gothic. Right? I forget the technical term.
Yeah.
They call it a chapel, but really it's a cathedral. It's huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
Designed by Pugin.
Oh, so, yeah. Okay.
So Pugin designed it. He's been known as God's architect. So. Wow. Yeah, anybody who's interested in Pugin, he designed so many of these, neo-Gothic churches all over the place, and he also I believe he also designed the church at Oscott, where John Henry Newman celebrated his first mass. I was there in Birmingham at Oscott, and the students were telling me, a student called Gaven, in fact, was telling me that this is where Newman celebrated his first mass, and this was designed by Pugin as well.
Wow.
So at Maynooth, there are a number of places which were designed by Pugin, including where we have coffee nearly every day, Pugin Hall. And
that's a beautiful cafeteria as well.
Dining room hall, refectory.
Cafeteria, it kind of sounds a little bit more insulting to the beauty of the architecture.
Exactly. Gentle listeners, get yourselves out to St. Patrick's, Maynooth. It's a beautiful place to be and a beautiful place to study. So I'm glad that we caught you then, Sean, and that you're now here enriching our campus.
Oh, thank you. The pleasure's been all mine.
So there's a number of things that you bring up, and I think it'd be great to dig down into. Maybe we could start just with your engagement with Plato.
Sure.
How's that? So you talk about the apology, and you talk about Socrates, and so maybe if I give a wee bit of background on Socrates, you can maybe talk to us about the Socrates and the apology and some of the, yeah, and we could get drawn into that. Because Neve and I have chatted with the gentle listeners on Plato and the Republic and the myth of the cave, and stepping out into the light, and being captivated by the light. But there's also a lot going on in those early dialogues of Plato, which describes Socrates' final days. So we'll dig deep into that, yeah.
Of course.
Strap in, gentle listeners. We're digging deep into Plato. So, gentle listeners, Socrates, he's a figure in Plato's dialogues. He was a real historical figure. You do believe that, don't you, Sean?
Of course.
That he was a real figure.
It's sort of fun.
Yeah, there's some who doubt, but yeah, he was a real figure. And he was a mentor. I don't think he would call himself a teacher of Plato. He was certainly a mentor.
Well, because he tries to redefine teaching in general.
Yeah. So what Socrates did is that he would have gone around Athens, trying to learn wisdom from people. He saw his quest in life as a quest of the pursuit of wisdom, so the philosopher. And he would have asked people basically just very simple, straightforward questions which they could not answer. He wanted to become as wise as he thought these people were, and by asking them these questions, they couldn't answer them. So, for instance, he asks the judge, what is justice? And the judge, gives examples, and Socrates says, oh, okay, brilliant, that they're all just, but that's not what justice is. What is it about them that makes it just? He asks the priest, what is holiness? Is holiness doing what God tells you, or does God tell you to do things because they are holy? The Eutyphero dilemma.
Oh, yeah.
The answer is both, gentle listeners. So he asks these important people all these things, and they can't give him an answer. Well, he can't give him an answer that he can't pick holes in. And usually when you ask important people important questions and you're able to pick them apart in their answers, it gets you into trouble, doesn't it? And this is where Socrates was put on trial. Isn't that right? So why don't you take it up from there, Sean, and tell us about the apology?
Well, in the apology, he begins trying to... There's the antagonist of the apology is Meletus, right, who seems to be this character is orchestrating this kind of conspiracy against Socrates, and so it's in the Athenian law system where I think it's a Council 500, or it's a very large jury, and so most of the apology is Socrates kind of dismantling the arguments against him, because he has, I believe, 3 charges, right? Yeah. Corrupting the youth, impiety, and I forget the third, or is it just those 2? No,
it's corrupting the youth and the impiety. Okay. Being an atheist, basically.
Yeah. And he actually refutes that, but people argue that he's advocating for a type of monotheism. He talks about the daimon. Yeah. Which gets to his notion of a divine kind of mandate behind his movement.
Yeah.
But he dismantles these charges against him, and he's trying to defend himself, and they bring it up for a vote. And it's really sad. It's because I think he fails by it's a 60-40 percentage or something. It's like there's a very minor majority that sentences him to death. And the apology kind of hits the next wave is after he's convicted, he goes into much more of I would say the more beautiful part of the apology, and he kind of lets loose. And my favorite quote is Thaton gar thedaton the, which is, for baseness runs quicker than death, when he criticizes Meletus, where he's like, well, I may have been convicted of death, but you've been caught by wickedness. Yeah,
and isn't that a theme throughout Plato's works, that it's, it's worse to live a life of vice than to live a life of virtue in which nothing good happens to you?
No, it's definitely a major theme, and it's really, when you mentioned Socrates as not quite a teacher but a mentor, because he's emphasizing really throughout all of Plato is emphasizing through Socrates throughout all of these dialogues the virtue, right? It's not just the dialectic or making you win arguments, but really it's for the goal of discovering the good or virtue.
Yeah, it's such an important theme in Plato, and it sets off a number of issues that we've discussed on Faith and Reason before, and I want to draw you out on, because you've talked about being a cradle Catholic, and by the sounds of it, you never fell away. You just kept up with the faith, and it just strengthened and strengthened, and a bit like my own story. But yet, you talk about Socrates and this divine mandate that he felt for doing philosophy. And one of the stories is that he saw the Delphic oracle that said Socrates was the wisest of all. And the only reason why Socrates kind of felt that is because, well, he knew that he didn't know.
Yeah, humility.
Yeah. Whereas everybody else, had this, sort of arrogance to know. Well, not everybody else, but those people in the dialogues, they had this sort of, arrogance about them that they did know. And one of those things about that Socratic humility, that he doesn't possess the true wisdom, and it's something that we see in the lives of the saints, is that the wiser you get, the more you realize your lack of wisdom.
Yes.
The more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And it's like the saints. The closer to God they get, the more aware they are of their own sins.
And it's the component of wisdom where it's associated with the divine. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Wisdom is the divine knowledge. I think maybe it's defined differently, but yeah, it's associated with the divine. And as they engage, the saints especially, you see through their example, as they engage deeper and deeper with the search for wisdom, they realize how distant it is.
Yeah,
they realize how unattainable.
Yeah. They're initially captivated by the light outside of the cave, in the myth of the cave, but the more they try to come close to the light, the further the sun, which produces the light, seems. And this is setting off all sorts of thoughts in my mind about how the sun, the light, has to break into the cave, to break down the walls of the cave, so that you can be possessed by the light, not that you can possess it, so that it can possess you. And I mean, that's Christ, isn't it? Yeah. And so Socrates has this kind of sort of divine inspiration to be a philosopher, to ceaselessly seek out the truth wherever it's to be found. But these sort of baser individuals, who haven't seen the light, who don't have that sort of divine spark where they want to pursue the truth, they try to snuff that out.
Yes.
Which is what the apology is about.
Yeah, and it's also part of the larger focus of Plato, right? Versus the sophists, those who abuse this ability to search for wisdom, these faculties of knowledge and intelligence. Yeah,
because the sophists, they just teach you how to win arguments. If you want to be a politician, they'll teach you how to be a politician, and how maybe not to be a good politician in the sense of a good person, but to be somebody who succeeds at politics. If you want to be an economist, they'll teach you how to do economics, but maybe not to pursue the truth of a just economic system. And Plato and the Platonic Socrates, they're reacting to that big time, because that is a turning away of the truth and the good, which makes human life authentically human.
Most definitely. And in Aristophanes' portrayal of Socrates in the Clouds, which is actually mentioned in the Apology as why people think Socrates is guilty, he's portrayed as a sophist, right? And there's this whole dialogue between the good argument and the bad argument. But really, it's this in the Apology, the necessary distance Socrates tries to build between the true pursuit of wisdom and what that looks like, and how it's connected with virtue, and how he's not a sophist, and he's not corrupting the youth. He's really actually trying to bring them a sense of virtue.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, well, we're coming to the end of our first segment, Sean. So I think we've, sort of given a good sort of idea of Plato's Apology and what Socrates is after. It set off a ton of questions in my mind, but maybe we should let the listeners have a little break.
Of course.
A cup of tea.
Yeah.
I see you've got your coffee here with you already.
Yeah, I guess it's the American thing, right?
Yeah.
Coffee instead of tea.
This is it, exactly. Well, gentle listeners, go have a cup of tea or a coffee. On Holy Thursday, are we allowed to have donuts?
I think until after the Mass.
Until after Mass. Yeah. So have a donut if you're permitted, or if you're poor and Eve on retreat, you should not having anything.
You're not with those retreats.
Exactly. Go off, have a little break, and we'll be back after this little bit of music.
Giant to sleep, and Judith with her bravery his heel upon his head. Our ancient foe will soon be dead. God is man upon the cross, rose again, no death you lost. One by one will come to the beating of your drum, till the whole world shouts, let your kingdom come throughout. Let your kingdom, let your kingdom. One by one will come to the beating of your drum, till the whole world shouts, let your kingdom come throughout. Let your kingdom come. Let your kingdom come. Oh, come and lay your weapons down, for in his kingdom peace is found. Pick up your feet and dance around to celebrate our king is crowned. Oh, come and lay your weapons down, for in his kingdom peace is found. Pick up your feet and dance around to celebrate our king is crowned. One by one will come to the beating of your drum, till the whole world shouts, let your kingdom come throughout. Let your kingdom. One by one will come to the beating of your drum, till the whole world shouts, let your kingdom come throughout. Let your kingdom come. Come one and all, every land and everyone, pick up your feet and dance. See the kingdom at last. Come brave or small, for the king.
30 seconds and then a quick jingle.
Let your kingdom come. One and all, every land and everyone, pick up your feet and dance. See the kingdom at last. Come brave or small, for the king calls. Let your kingdom
Hi everyone, Father Marius here, and I'm delighted to tell you about Rosary for Ireland. This happens at 9 p.m. every evening on Radio Maria Ireland when we pray for our country here, Ireland, north and south. We pray for the whole country. We pray the Rosary. Join me and Kathy Sinnott every evening at 9 p.m. here on Radio Maria Ireland for Rosary for Ireland.
Welcome back, gentle listeners. I hope you enjoyed that music. You got a cup of tea and a hot drink. Yeah? You enjoying yourself, Sean?
I am.
Yeah? Is this your first time, being broadcast?
I believe so, yeah.
Excellent. Well, it's good fun. I'll just remind you, gentle listeners, of how to text in if you want to text in a message. Just to the text or the WhatsApp, it's 089 467 2000. That's 089 467 2000. And if you're from outside of Ireland, that's plus 353 89 467 2000. That's plus 353 89 467 2000. And anybody who wants to tune in, watch us live, you can find us on the Radio Maria Ireland website. You can go on to the Facebook page, or you can onto the YouTube, and you'll just see the live stream. You'll see Sean here, chatting with me, and just come along and send in your messages. We've already got a few questions sent in, and our former co-host, Niamh Palmer, has already messaged us in asking how we're doing. Isn't that right? So she's meant to be on retreat. But
yeah, I guess she snuck away.
She couldn't help herself.
Nervous about her job.
Yeah, nervous about her job. That we have another paneler taking over.
Yeah. Maybe
Maybe we'll have Sean back in the future. Maybe that's something the gentle listeners could decide.
Yeah, we'll have to see how this works.
Yeah, we'll just have to see how this works out. I thought maybe, since we were talking about Plato and that Socratic, the Platonic Socrates having this sort of divine drive in him to pursue truth and wisdom and the good life fundamentally, at the expense of all else, even at the expense of his life, and not to waver from that as well, because wasn't it I think it was in the Creto where they offered to break him out of prison, he's going to be allowed to escape from prison. And do you want to fill us in on how he responds to that?
Well, he says no, and he accepts. I forget why, but I believe, isn't it because he wants to accept the decree from the Athenian court system, right? 'Cause Plato had the money to bail him out. There's a lot of different plots that could have gotten him. So he basically chose to abide by conviction.
Yeah, I think it was, I mean, the way it was set up was the idea is that, okay, he's going to be pronounced guilty, he's going to, you know, be condemned to death. But a lot of the times in the ancient world when that happened, especially to a very likable public figure with a huge following, it was kind of like, right, you're condemned to death, but if we don't see you about tomorrow, if you go off into exile, we'll sort of let the matter drop. And I think that was the idea. And so, I mean, you had, Plato was from a rich family, political family, and, you know, he was going to get, he could have got Socrates away, but Socrates says something along the lines of, it's been years since I read or even taught this, but I always remember this impacting on me, that he spent his life defending the legitimacy and the goodness of the Athenian state. And if he were to turn his back now on the judgment that the state has made on him, whilst he's lived a life of blessings from the state and defended the state, if he were to escape and disobey the ruling of the state, it would undermine everything that he's done. He can't just, you know, decide that, no, the state is bad now, you know, I can't, you know, be obedient to the state that I've lived my life defending just because I've ended up on the wrong side of the state. So he embraces the judgment of the state because he sees, he places value in a truth greater than he.
Yeah, and there's always, as modern readers, we always want to project onto these ancient figures. Like Socrates, the iconoclast, right? He's resisting, he's kind of doing his own thing, breaking the mold.
Exactly.
You know? But it's a true, deeper sense of being a citizen in Athens, what we don't really, I think, fully embrace or understand.
Yeah. He saw the value in that, you know, to be a citizen and to be a member of the state and to enjoy the protections of the state, especially in the ancient world. So that if you enjoy the good things from the state, you also have to take the bad things as well, given the protections that you have. But I wanted to draw you out on this, Sean, because you talk about, you know, so you've been a cradle Catholic and you've lived your life as a Catholic and you've fallen in love, you've been captivated by philosophy. Would that be true to say?
I would say so.
You're a lover of wisdom and all the rest. Do you see any sort of parallels in Socrates' life and being drawn to wisdom in your own life of faith and in your own life of coming into philosophy?
I would say so.
Okay.
Especially the notion of really engaging with others. That's really what kind of really set off and my philosophical journey, I would say, was teaching. Really engaging in the classroom and kind of seeing people learn, like seeing a child kind of, because I taught 11 to 14-year-olds. I forget what that would be in the Irish school system.
Yeah, that would be, we would call that, well, in the Northern Irish school system, that would be first to maybe fourth into their GCSE years.
Okay. Yeah. So it was just kind of seeing your ability to impact others and seeing how learning really doesn't occur like primarily through like didactic instruction, like lecturing. Yeah. It helps. But it's just so much is an environmental, it's an interpersonal connection, and really it occurs through communication, really bubbling it down to that. So in my own philosophical journey, seeing that, it just really kind of fed my own desire to learn and to really teach others really virtue. And so in my master's thesis, that's what I really wanted to play out through my reading of Plato, was this connection between text and virtue. And this because of my love of language and seeing, you know, the play and language interpretation, and then also seeing in how that teaches us virtue. How do we get this sense of pursuing the good or pursuing, you know, a Catholic identity through a static entity or a block of text? Yeah. And so that just really kind of ate at me. And as I, you know, engaged in studying here, as I look at the field of philosophy called hermeneutics, which is the philosophy of understanding and reading, it's just still is, while I engage in abstract thinking and trying to really look at what's happening, the goal is always to be for the other and to like a sense of transmitting that virtue and really kind of helping in a praxis in a way to kind of lead others to the good. And that's kind of always the engine driving this.
Yeah,
really.
yeah. There's a few things I want to pull apart there. I mean, I want to talk about virtue and the reading of a text and how one can grow in virtue with a text. Because virtue is a practice, whereas a text is an object. So, and I suppose a lot of your research is how do you go from this object to its implementation into a praxis, right? I do want to pull that apart. But I'm really interested in what you say about being a teacher and being that sort of Socratic type of teacher, because there are some teachers, there are some lecturers that we know, well, maybe not that we know, but we've experienced.
Yes.
And the words come out of their mouth, they go into the classroom, they go through one ear of the students, through the brain of each student, and they follow everything back round again, out the other ear and back to the lecture, and they never stay in the minds of the student.
Yes.
Isn't that right?
Yeah. And I would say that also, so I think I've been in this perspective, teaching at points, was you kind of check out while you're speaking. You're just kind of like you're just kind of going through the motions, reading off slides of a PowerPoint, and you notice that you've been talking for 15 minutes and you really haven't been reflecting on what you're saying. So I think it's just there needs to be a sense of looking at the being present in the moment while teaching and kind of how the learning occurs. There
has to be a cooperation with the students.
Yes.
Isn't that right? You need to be the sort of lecturer or teacher who is drawing the students with you. Yeah. Who brings out in the students what's there to be brought out.
Yeah. And that's perfectly encapsulated in the dialogues, right? It's the penetrating questions. It's asking questions of the learner, of the pupil, making the pupil stand on their own 2 feet.
But there's also something about that. So Socrates, he asks the questions and he's trying to draw the learner out, by asking the learner to ask these questions as well. Sometimes whenever you're teaching, especially 11 to 14-year-olds, but even me, I'm lecturing to, young adults, old adults and everybody else in between. And let's say I need to teach Plato's Republic. Well, I just need to get up there and I need to say, right, book 1 does this, book 2 does this is what we do. Now, there's a way of doing that where when I'm telling them about book 1 of Plato's Republic, it goes out into one ear of the student, through all the ears of the other students and back round to me. Or there's a way of doing that where I can engage with the students and get them to put themselves in Plato's position, to get them to the level where Plato was at, to see why these issues matter and to start thinking like Plato. And that's something different. That's not just giving them information about the Republic. That's getting them to think like the Plato who wrote the Republic.
Yeah, and it's giving them a sense of confidence, right? Because everybody has questions, right? But this is something I've been guilty of. But people ask, anybody have any questions? And nobody says anything, right? Because they have questions, but you've not given them the tools or the desire to really kind of jump out of their seat to ask you a question. So it's a tricky play, I think, in cultivating an environment of teaching where the student is not just has a question and is confused, but wants to engage, wants to come out of themselves and provide it for the rest of the class.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're so right that students, they do have these questions, or they have this inkling that they might have a question that they want to ask. And a lot of students, have you found, think that unless I can articulate this question in a way that sounds like I'm some way intelligent, I'm not going to sort of start speaking my mind. Yeah. And Sean, I don't know, my advice to such students, and for any student that is listening, if you think you might have a question and you still can't formulate it, just start asking and talking to the lecturer, because the rest of your classmates feel exactly the same as you.
Oh yeah. And one of my first days here, we had a postgrad seminar. And I had a question, but I was so nervous to ask a question in a room full of academics, like people that have been working on PhDs and are PhDs. And so you kind of clam up and you're like, okay, I'll just wait because I'm not smart enough to ask a question, when that's really counterintuitive, right?
Yeah.
In order to gain knowledge, you have to pursue it. You have to put yourself out there. And sometimes when you begin to formulate the question when you're talking, it kind of just comes together when you just start talking.
Yeah. Which is what the dialogue is about, isn't it? That once you start dialoguing, the questions become apparent, and then the answers also become apparent to that as well.
It takes on a life of its own.
Exactly. And so you are not philosophizing, you're being drawn into philosophy, into wisdom through the dialogue, which is what Socrates did.
Yes, he
Yeah.
he called himself the midwife.
The midwife of knowledge, yeah.
Yeah.
So he brings it out of the students, and there's something independent of us that we're committed to and we're drawn by as philosophers.
Most definitely.
Yeah, wonderful. So Sean, it sounds like you're a great teacher. Anyway,
I mean, in theory.
yeah, of course I am. Yeah, great teacher. So tell me then about virtue, growing in virtue, because to grow in virtue we have to practice virtue. So the classic example is courage. To become courageous, we have to fake it till we make it.
Yeah.
You have to pretend to be courageous and face things that about which you don't feel courageous, and then after a while you're courageous.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you cease to be afraid, it just means that you're able to do an action despite being afraid. How does the reading of a text help with that kind of practical living?
So there's a couple of approaches to this question that I've received, and the most, I think, powerful, the most one that I've understood and I think has affected me the most is Paul Ricoeur's notion of the narrative. And basically he says that when we read a text, we are confronting a narrative. So and we then understand ourselves. We've always understood ourselves by our own narratives. Right? When we began the radio show today, you asked me kind of a brief, who am I, right? And I kind of launched into somewhat of a story of my education. So we understand ourselves through this narrative. So the text, whatever it is, if it's a true, logical discourse, or if it's just a fiction or a newspaper article, there's always a narrative that's occurring. And so as we read the text, we're kind of comparing narratives, and we're kind of assimilating that narrative into our own narrative.
Yeah.
And for me, that's when it's about virtue. You're kind of playing out in your, productive imagination. Right? I think that's a Kantian term.
Yeah.
And so in your productive imagination, right, you're laying forward the occurrence of virtue, because if the text is describing this virtuous act, you kind of see it before you. So already you're getting that first level of contact, that because in order for us to then learn, we have to imitate. So you're providing a narrative for which that you can imitate. You're providing a virtue, an example of a virtue that you can then receive and begin to understand and begin to practice in your own life. That's basically what I've read.
Is it a bit like when we read the lives of the saints?
Exactly.
Yeah. We see these lives and we begin to identify with that, and then that starts to infiltrate our being and our way of thinking about the world, so that we start living like the saints.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, everyone talks about St. Augustine, his Confessions. It's one of the most powerful, autobiographies of Western civilization.
Yeah.
And it's because there's so much there that you can connect with in your own narrative journey that you with. And especially as a young, aspiring academic, his own, confrontation of different things. So you see not only how virtue was portrayed in that novel or in that book, but also the types of challenges he overcame, right? The type of obstacles. And so that's because virtue is a practice that becomes a habit, that becomes the character, right?
Yeah.
Becomes you. So it's by seeing the narrative, you kind of begin to lay the groundwork by which you can then apply it in your own daily life.
Absolutely. Well, we're coming up to another break now, Sean. So,
That's good.
It's bounding in. Gentle listeners, I think you might need another coffee or another tea. We're going to get into our last segment. But just before we get into it, just to remind you of the text and the WhatsApp. If you want to text or WhatsApp into the show, it's 089 467 2000. That's 089 467 2000. And if you're texting in from outside of Ireland, it's plus 353 89 467 2000. That's plus 353 89 467 2000. Please send in your difficult questions for me and Sean. For Sean in particular, he's the guest. I get the day off, when I have a guest in.
Heavy lifting.
I don't have Neve here to help me answer the questions.
That's true.
Please do text in heavy questions. I want to talk to Sean about his PhD work after the break. So go off and have a little break, gentle listeners. Listen to some music, and we'll see you in a few minutes.
Longing for home that I've never known. Spent all that I own. No love satisfies this aching inside. Oh, the ways that I so strong. There's no other heart like yours, waiting to welcome me home. There's no other place I choose to stay. Your heart is a home where you welcome me, where you welcome me, where you welcome me. Your heart is a home for me. The treasure I seek, which every heart longs to find, is right here with me. What more do I need? There's no other love I found that waited for me. But hold held on so strong. There's no other heart like yours, waiting to welcome me home. There's no other place I choose to stay. Your heart is a home where you welcome me, where you welcome me, where you welcome me. Your heart is a home where I long to be, where you welcome me, where you welcome me. Your heart is a home that you want for me, where you welcome me, where you welcome me. Your heart is a home where I long to be, where you welcome me, where you welcome me. Your heart is a home for me, for me, for me. You're all that I waited for me, for me, for me. I'm all that you waited for me, for me, for me. You're all that I waited for me, for me, for me. Your heart is a home where you welcome me, where you welcome me, where you welcome me. Your heart is a home where I long to be, where you welcome me, where you welcome me. Your heart is a home that you want for me, where you welcome me, where you welcome me.
30 seconds and then a quick jingle.
There's no other heart like yours, waiting to welcome me home. There's no other place I choose to stay. Your heart is a home for me.
We are so blessed to know about the great gift that is Radio Maria and to be able to tune in for our daily prayer or favourite shows, or to send in our intentions for the whole Radio Maria Ireland community to pray for. There are still so many people who haven't yet discovered this gift. Why don't you call a friend or family member today and let them know about Radio Maria?
Welcome back, gentle listeners. We're back. I hope you got another sort of a drink, hot drink.
Yeah.
You know, definitely a hot, non-stiff drink.
No, yeah, it's Holy Thursday.
As we're about to go off the deep end, aren't we?
I believe so.
Because, gentle listeners, Sean is going to tell us about his PhD research.
Huh.
So we couldn't let him away without telling us about his PhD research. I can't remember if Andrew, a few weeks back, told us about the research that he's doing, but
It would definitely have to be 2 shows.
it would have to be 2 shows. I mean, that is some serious stuff that he's doing. Now, Sean, I am not your PhD supervisor.
You're not.
I don't think I have any educational oversight of you.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I'm free.
So, you're free. So, I can just sit back and I can actually find out what one of our PhD students is researching and writing about. So,
Yeah.
you go and you tell me all about it.
So, as I mentioned earlier, the text and writing connection, the text and virtue connection, and the kind of the narrative theory of Paul Ricoeur. But so my PhD is on Paul Ricoeur and his hermeneutic theory with another Catholic, Paul Ricoeur is Christian, but another Catholic thinker of the 20th century named René Girard. And René Girard is he's picking up a lot of steam as an influence in hermeneutics. He has a philosophical anthropology, He's a very interesting figure. Bishop Robert Barron also speaks very highly of him, thinks he's actually in 100 years or so could be considered a father of the church or something. It's very high praise. Anyway, so I'm looking at their hermeneutic methods in regard to original sin, because as I talked about this connection between writing, or between text and virtue, I want to see in order for us to be virtuous, it implies that we're not perfect the way we are, right? So Paul Kerr has a book called Symbolism of Evil, where he engages with this notion of fault. He calls it a phenomenology of fault. Mm-hmm. So he looks at how we consider ourselves to be fallen, and he looks through biblical texts, ancient myths, and this notion of fault, sin, and guilt. Mm-hmm. And then René Girard has these two famous theories called mimetic desire and the scapegoat mechanism, which I won't get into because it'll be another hour. Mm-hmm. But for mimetic desire, that for him is this: we have this natural desire that is not ours because we always learn through imitation, so our desires are imitative. Mm-hmm. And that's the beginning of original sin. Right. So I'm looking at those two and how the hermeneutic method that really shows an understanding of fault, and then how are those hermeneutic methods actually a response to fault through virtue?
Do you find that your research, so you're going to be a young academic with a PhD in a few years, God willing, willing. I'm sure, we're all, that's the progress, that's the path. Yeah. No reason why, that doesn't have to happen. Yeah. Except for you could be the reason why it doesn't. So you're going to be a young man with a PhD in the world. You've done all this, sort of work on Ricoeur and Girard. And I know I had to face this issue, faithful Catholic. I did a PhD on St. Thomas Aquinas and Immanuel Kant. Right, now, how do I make myself useful to the church, to evangelizing the world? And our good friend, Andrew, well, your good friend, my good student, Andrew, has messaged in wanting us to talk about the difference between, that authentic teaching that Socrates did and that we try to be versus rote learning, and how we can evangelize authentically in the way that Socrates brought his students round. He didn't just, teach them by rote and give them information, but he brought them into the truth. How we can evangelize like that, as opposed to a more inauthentic evangelization, which is if somebody has a question about the truth of the gospel, we look up the manual, we find out, the answer. We go to the catechism, there's the answer right there. Okay, all questions have been answered.
Yes, debate over.
And that's that more rote learning. That's all right, students, this is it, learn it. Yeah. Okay, as opposed to that inspiring, authentic teaching. How will you, as a young man with a PhD on Girard and Ricoeur, address that? How will you evangelize authentically, if it is your wish to evangelize?
Definitely you got to practice what you preach. Mm-hmm. And I believe with my research, you're looking at, especially in Girard, this intersubjective relationships with others and yourself, and the kind of the acceptance of our fault, the acceptance of this kind of the evil that human beings have. Mm. But it requires a level of acceptance, a level of God's grace, right, and kind of overcoming that in your practice, in your life as a Catholic. Mm. And so, when you try to teach authentically and evangelize, you have to, it's not something that you are doing per se. I mean, you're participating in it, but it's really the evangelization comes from the other, comes from the student. Right? Yeah, it's not your evangelization; it's their evangelization in a sense. Right? Yeah. The process begins. You might be a mediator or a participator in it, but it really comes from the student. And I think the true test of authenticity is how you accept their evangelization, or how you understand it, and how you show that you understand. Because a lot of times when students ask questions or try to engage you, you show a sense of responsiveness or receptivity, and it's really half the battle, I think, in teaching sometimes, or evangelizing, is how you respond to their questions or how you respond to their statements. Because your response dictates whether or not they go along further. And really being open to learn from the other. And in my own life, as I began teaching, I was right out of college, and while, yes, I was a cradle Catholic, there's everyone has their own struggles with their faith, but really, when I first started teaching, the witness of these children who I was teaching really kind of changed me, really kind of was my own source for my own evangelization from them. And I want to talk about one of my students in particular, my first year. Her name was Maria Middleton, and she passed away, I believe, in 2019. She was a very close family friend as well. And she was a great model to her classmates, and she was top of her class, very athletic, a really gregarious, really powerful presence. And she went on to a local Catholic high school, and she was president of her class. And unfortunately, she was diagnosed with a brain tumor her junior year of her high school career. And but she had a message of just, keep praying and think hope was her message. And there's actually now a foundation for her and the community back home called thinkhope.org, if you want to look that up, listeners. And so it's just the example of the student sometimes really affects the teacher, and it's really powerful for the teacher. And I think evangelization authentically has to occur in that, between the student and the teacher. It's not a top-down, right? We talked about the rote learning. There's no rote evangelization, because when you're doing that, you're not really caring the other's response.
Yeah. And I mean, that story that you gave us about Maria Middleton, that student of yours, just briefly, because I do want to, sort of pick up on something with regard to Socrates and authentic evangelization. How did that experience then, sort of impact on your attitude towards teaching and towards evangelization?
Well, that it's not just, it becomes, a student like that can change an entire environment. And she changed really not just the school environment, but her high school, the greater, Bucks County Catholic community. She went to Uganda on a mission trip after her diagnosis. So she's really, it just shows that the effects of teaching, the effects of the communication between the student and the teacher have reverberations at a much greater level, and a really environmental change. Look at Socrates. We're still talking about Socrates and Plato and his students thousands of years later.
Yeah, well, this is something that, has always captivated me about Socrates and about the great saints, is that in their pursuit of the true and the good, in their pursuit of wisdom, they're always measured by something other than themselves. They are never the measure of themselves. They're always measured by something other than themselves. It's always a common joke, and I hate to make it, but I've got a high school teacher in front of me, and I'm a university lecturer, and my daughter's experiencing it at the minute in school as well. And it's always that, the high school teacher or the school teacher is like, when you go to university and when you go to college, it'll not be as easy. It'll not be as easy as this. And you'll have to refer to your teachers as professor and lecturer, and that's what's going to happen. And then when you get to the university and you see the lecturer, and the lecturer comes in, it's like, hey students, here's my Facebook page, add me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter, my name's Gav, you don't call me doctor. And it's completely different. But I think the reason why I bring it up, it sort of brings up that sense that, and I'm not saying that everybody who has a PhD are further along in wisdom, but what I am saying is, those who are interested in the pursuit of the genuine pursuit of wisdom and the good, be that a high school teacher, a third level academic, anybody, is that they realise there is something independent of them, not so much to which they are answerable, okay, not in that sense, but more in a sense which is the measure of them. They are not the centre of the universe. They're not the centre of reality. There is something which is at the centre, and they are trying to enter into its orbit. And that's what we're trying to do in the pursuit of wisdom, but also in the Catholic life, which is why Socrates is such a captivating figure, which is why you mentioned Augustine. He does that, and St. Thomas Aquinas does that, and all these heroes of the faith are trying to enter into the orbit of some reality which measures them and is the goal of all their activities.
Yeah, and it's, you talked about the orbit, which is very important because it's, while I'm saying that the student really kind of has this ability to evangelize, which is true, but the teacher also provides a role model, and it extends an orbit, and it builds the classroom as its orbit, right? It kind of, through this practice, this contagious practice of virtue, it really spreads a message, and but unfortunately, the message can be good or bad, which we have seen, I think, in our culture today. It's it's especially in the States, right? Everyone looks at academia as leading others astray, and that's you think of the Gospels, right? It's the millstone thrown around the neck of those who are scandals to children, right?
Yeah.
So there's the famous quote from Batman: "With great power comes great responsibility." So there's definitely a dynamism to teaching and learning and the classroom environment, but it has a very serious consequences.
Yeah. Is that a Batman quote? I thought that was Spider-Man.
I'm not sure.
Right, the gentle listeners will have to illuminate us on that one.
It'll be a new debate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll wait until Neve's back, if we'll have Neve back after
pop
this
culture
episode.
expert.
Yeah. Sean, we have only a few minutes left. So, in the last interview we did with Andrew, I had to ask him how he has felt about his time at St Patrick's over the last couple of semesters. So he's been here since September. You've been here. You started at the same time with Andrew.
I did.
You've been here 2 semesters, and so what is your sense of St Patrick's? What is your sense of Ireland coming in, and what is your sense of all the people that you've met? Was it the right decision? Are you happy you came here?
It is 100% the right decision.
Okay.
I adore Ireland.
Okay.
It's I think Andrew mentioned this, and I know we have talked about it a lot, me and him. It's just different enough, but it's not too different than home, right? Because there's the Irish influence back home. I'm part Irish, so it's definitely coming to the roots. There's a sense of that, and there's a sense of peace to Ireland. That, not disparaging home, but it's a little busier back home. It's nice to kind of read and walk around the beautiful square next to the cathedral. It's been a transformative, I would say, experience so far.
So you're happy you came then?
Very happy.
So we said, gentle listeners, we said at the start of the show that if Sean discovers he's part Irish, he's probably related to Neve in some sort of way, given the same surname.
Yeah.
So we're going to find that out. We're going to find a historian to find that family tree.
Yeah, there's a lot of threads I'll have to follow, but
exactly. Well, Sean, thank you for coming in and chatting with us, gentle listeners. I hope you enjoyed that. I think it goes without saying, Sean, we wish the gentle listeners a very happy and holy Easter.
Most definitely. Have a happy and holy Triduum.
Exactly. Exactly. And take a little break, gentle listeners, after Easter Sunday. This is the major feast in the church's year. We can take a little break and we can just enjoy the presence of our Lord and all of his glory.
Yeah, true feasting.
Exactly. Gentle listeners, God bless you. We will be back with a recorded episode next week and then back live with the indefatigable Neve, if we'll have her back, in 2 weeks' time. God bless.
Thank you.